They thought destroying my bridge would break me. What they didn't realize was that I held the power to destroy their entire waterfront paradise. And it all began the day the HOA decided my little wooden bridge was an eyesore. The neighborhood of Willow Creek had always been a place where appearances mattered more than people. The sprawling, gated waterfront community sat around a man-made lake, each home flaunting massive glass windows, pristine lawns, and private docks. The lake itself wasn't natural. It was held together by an old dam, a piece of engineering tucked discreetly at the far end of the water, almost forgotten by the millionaires who sipped wine on their decks. I wasn't one of them. My property stood just beyond the HOA's boundary, an old family plot that had been there long before the HOA existed. My land touched the edge of the lake, though not directly on their manicured shorelines. A narrow creek split my property, and years ago, I built a sturdy little wooden bridge across it. A bridge that wasn't fancy, but it was mine. That bridge carried generations of footsteps, a memory of family, and a connection to the quiet solitude of my home. But to the HOA, it was a problem. They hated anything they couldn't control. And since my land touched the creek that fed into their precious lake, they decided my bridge was a safety hazard, a violation of community standards, even though my property wasn't under their jurisdiction. It started with letters, official-looking envelopes stuffed into my mailbox, each one angrier than the last. At first, I ignored them. Then came the fines, ridiculous sheets of paper demanding money I didn't owe. And then came the threats, remove the bridge or they would take action. I laughed at them, a group of board members, with their clipboards and smug smiles, thinking they could tell me what to do on my land. But I didn't know how far they were willing to go. One morning, I woke up to the sound of chainsaws. I rushed outside, and there they were, men in neon vests, hired by the HOA, ripping my bridge apart plank by plank. The wood cracked and splintered, the pieces falling into the creek below as if they were erasing part of my history. They claimed it was for community safety. They claimed it was their right. But all I saw was vandalism, arrogance, and power gone unchecked. That bridge wasn't just wood. It was the last project I had built with my father before he passed away. Every nail, every beam held memory. Watching it torn down by strangers under the HOA's command lit a fire inside me. The HOA thought they had won. They thought they had reminded me of my place. But in their greed, they didn't see what I saw. They didn't understand that by tearing down that bridge, they opened a door I had never thought about before. Because while the board members obsessed over lawns, mailboxes, and the exact shade of beige allowed on garage doors, they had forgotten something far more important. The lake only existed because of that old dam. And unlike my bridge, the dam wasn't theirs. It was mine. You see, the dam that created Willow Creek Lake had been built decades ago by a private company. Over the years, the ownership passed hands until it quietly ended up in the local county records as privately maintained. The HOA assumed it belonged to the county, assumed someone else would care for it. But a few calls to the county office, and I discovered the truth. The dam was for sale. Dirt cheap, too, because no one wanted the liability of maintaining it. Except me. The day I signed those papers, I didn't just own land outside their gates. I owned the very thing that kept their million-dollar homes afloat. As I stood on top of the dam, looking out the glittering lake with its row of pristine waterfront mansions, I realized I held their lives in my hands. With a single decision, I could drain it dry, turning their dream homes into stranded shells sitting in mud. But revenge needed patience. I wouldn't destroy them overnight. I would let them feel secure, smug, untouchable, while I planned every detail. The HOA thought the bridge was the fight. They didn't know it was only the beginning. Because when you take away a man's memories, he'll find a way to take away what you love most. And for the residents of Willow Creek, that was the lake. The HOA had no idea I now owned the key to their entire community's fate. But the first cracks in their empire were already forming, and soon their $6 million mansions would stand helpless against me. They laughed when they tore down my bridge. But they didn't laugh when their perfect lake began to sink, inch by inch, day by day, while I held the lever that controlled it all. After the day I signed the deed to the dam, everything about Willow Creek looked different to me. Their glittering lake, the centerpiece of their wealth, was no longer theirs. The boats tied neatly at their private docks, the reflections of their glass mansions dancing on the water, even the delicate swans they paraded to impress guests. All of it was only possible because of the structure that now belonged to me. And the irony? They didn't even know. The HOA board kept sending me letters about my unauthorized bridge construction, threatening legal action for something they had already destroyed. Their arrogance blinded them from the real danger. I didn't throw the letters away. I kept every single one, stacking them in a drawer as reminders of the war they had started. From the top of the dam, I studied everything. The machinery was old but functional. Rust had eaten through the edges, and the concrete bore cracks from decades of pressure. But the control system worked. With a single turn of a wheel, I could lower the sluice gates and let the water trickle out. Slowly, invisibly. Not enough for anyone to notice right away. Just enough to make them uneasy. So I tested it. The first night, I opened the gate by half an inch. The sound of rushing water echoed into the darkness, a sound that filled me with both dread and satisfaction. For years, the lake had been their jewel, a moat around their castle of arrogance. But now it was mine to reshape. The next morning, when I drove past the neighborhood entrance, nothing seemed different. The lake shimmered under the sun, as usual. Children splashed near the docks, and homeowners rode their jet skis across the water. But I knew the level had dropped maybe an inch, maybe two, small enough to escape notice. But water never lies. Days passed, then weeks. The level sank subtly, just enough for their docks to begin groaning against the posts, the edges scraping against mud where water once kissed their lawns. Complaints began to surface at board meetings. I didn't need to be inside the room to know what was happening. Gossip traveled fast in Willow Creek. The water level is unstable. Something's wrong with the dam. Who's responsible for maintenance? Questions with no answers. And I sat quietly, sipping coffee on my porch, listening to the faint roar of water flowing beneath my feet. The first real panic hit when one of the residents, a wealthy developer named Sterling, hosted a party. He wanted to show off his new yacht, a sleek vessel that looked absurdly large for such a small lake. The night of the party, the lake had already dropped nearly a foot. Sterling tried to launch his yacht, but instead of gliding, the hull scraped against a muddy bottom. Guests laughed nervously. Sterling raged, and the HOA board scrambled for explanations. I didn't give them one. Instead, I pulled out the stack of letters they had sent me, the ones filled with threats, fines, and ultimatums about a bridge that no longer existed. Each word fueled me, hardening my resolve. They had humiliated me, stripped me of something sacred, and expected me to bow. But here they were, bowing to a lake that was slipping away like sand through their fingers. Still, I wasn't reckless. If I drained the water too quickly, they would trace it back to the dam. They might realize I owned it. No, I wanted them desperate, confused, and powerless. I wanted the destruction to unfold so slowly that by the time they understood, it would be too late. Weeks later, the shoreline looked naked. Boats leaned awkwardly on their sides, docks dangled above exposed mud, and the swans abandoned the shrinking shallows. For a community built entirely on appearances, the sight was catastrophic. Property values were crashing. Realtors whispered. Potential buyers fled. The board called an emergency meeting, summoning every homeowner to the clubhouse. And while they argued inside about lawsuits, repairs, and county intervention, I stood miles away at the dam, running my fingers across the rusted wheel that controlled their fate. I imagined their faces. The smug board president who had signed off on tearing down my bridge, the self-satisfied neighbors who thought their rules extended beyond their gates. All of them now united in panic, while I alone held the truth. And then, as if fate wanted to reward me further, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain lashed the lake, raising the water level temporarily. The HOA sighed in relief, believing nature had fixed their problem. But storms pass. The dam remained. And as soon as the skies cleared, the water slipped away again, faster than before. Rumors spread. Some said a sinkhole was forming under the lake. Others blamed faulty irrigation systems. But none dared suggest the truth, that the very foundation of their paradise belonged to someone they had wronged. Meanwhile, I made plans, legal ones. Ownership of the dam gave me power far beyond control of the water. I could charge fees for maintenance, demand compensation for improvements, even decide access rights. The HOA board would soon learn that their power stopped at their white fences. Beyond that lay reality, a reality I controlled. One evening, I returned to creek where my bridge once stood. The broken planks still lay rotting in the mud, reminders of what they had taken from me. But instead of bitterness, I felt calm. They thought they destroyed me. Instead, they had awakened something unstoppable. Because soon, they wouldn't just lose their lake. They would lose everything built upon it. The water continued to vanish, exposing secrets buried beneath the lake bed, and the HOA's empire began to collapse under its own weight. But they hadn't seen the worst yet. The true revenge was still to come, and would leave their $6 million mansion stranded in the mud, worthless and abandoned. They thought the storm would save them. They thought the lake would refill, their docks would rise, and their mansions would shine again. But when the water kept vanishing and the mud swallowed their $1 million dreams, they finally realized someone was behind it, and that someone was me. The summer dragged on, and with every sunrise, Willow Creek looked less like a paradise and more like a wasteland. The once glittering water had receded so far that entire docks hung uselessly in the air, their wooden legs planted in cracked mud. Boats sat abandoned like carcasses, propped awkwardly on dry earth. The perfect reflections of the mansions were gone, replaced by nothing but barren emptiness. Homeowners tried everything. The HOA spent thousands on water studies, engineers, and consultants. Some believed it was groundwater seepage. Others thought the dam had naturally weakened. But no one could explain how a lake that had existed for decades was suddenly draining away before their eyes. And then came the smell. With the water gone, the lake bed exposed or had been hidden for years. Slimy weeds, fish bones, and garbage buried deep in the muck. The stench carried across the neighborhood, sour and heavy, clinging to their $1 million patios. Evening wine parties on the decks ended. Windows stayed shut. Realtors stopped showing the homes altogether. Property values nosedived. The dream of Willow Creek was rotting in the sun. Meanwhile, I stood at the dam, watching the water flow freely downstream. It was almost poetic. Life blooming downstream while upstream, their artificial world collapsed. The sound of rushing water became my anthem. Each surge a reminder of the power I held in my hands. But the HOA wasn't done fighting. Desperation makes people dangerous. One morning, I saw them. A convoy of SUVs pulled up near the dam. Out stepped the HOA president, flanked by board members and even a hired lawyer. They came storming down the path, clipboards in hand, their faces twisted with fury. They shouted, demanded answers, claimed they had authority. But authority meant nothing here, because a deed in my pocket said otherwise. The dam was mine, legally, undeniably mine. When I showed them the paperwork, their faces turned pale. For the first time, the arrogance slipped. They realized they weren't fighting a broken pipe or an act of God. They were fighting me. The board begged. They offered money, promises, even forgiveness for past misunderstandings. They called the bridge incident a miscommunication, as if tearing down my father's memory was a clerical error. But I had kept their letters. I had kept their threats. And I wasn't about to forgive. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply turned the wheel another notch, and the water gushed louder beneath us. They flinched at the sound, as if hearing their wealth washing away. Word spread fast. Soon, homeowners stormed the HOA meetings, demanding answers the board couldn't give. The once proud president, the same man who had ordered my bridge destroyed, now faced a mob of angry neighbors demanding refunds, lawsuits, and resignations. Their empire of control collapsed from within. And me? I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching from a distance as chaos consumed them. Their carefully manicured world had fallen apart, not with fire or violence, but with the slow, relentless truth of water draining away. By autumn, the lake was gone. Completely. What once sparkled as a jewel of luxury was now nothing but a cracked basin of mud. Mansions that had sold for $6 million couldn't even fetch $500,000. Some residents fled, abandoning their dreams. Others stayed, trapped in worthless homes, staring out the wasteland that used to make them rich. And all because they destroyed one small wooden bridge. The irony was too perfect. They had erased a memory, and in return, I erased their entire community. The HOA no longer sent me letters. Their voices were silent. Their power was gone. I rebuilt my bridge. Stronger this time. Each plank was a promise that no one would ever take away what mattered to me again. Standing there, watching the creek flow beneath, I felt no guilt, just peace. Because revenge hadn't been about anger. It had been about balance. They took from me. I took from them. And in the end, I didn't just win. I rewrote the rules. If you think this HOA got what it deserved, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because there are more stories where justice finds its way in the most unexpected forms. Don't let Karen or any HOA win again. Subscribe and join me for the next story of karma, revenge, and justice served cold.